So it looks like there are no students participating in the Romeo and Juliet Socratic seminar for this morning. Hopefully, there'll be some people who come in at 2 o'clock so we can actually have a discussion about Romeo and Juliet. This is also a great time to ask questions if you don't understand what's going on. But since I have everything set up and I don't want to kind of waste the time and space that I have, I'm going to go through and talk about the essay prompt. So that way, students who are not quite sure what they're doing, you can take a look at this video and hopefully get some ideas. So let me see where this actually starts. This is the writing task that you're going to be asked. And it says, while Romeo and Juliet is a tragedy, scholars have had a difficult time pinpointing the tragic hero or heroes in the play. Some have even speculated that it is fate itself which intrudes, and therefore nothing can stop the events that occur. Write an essay about a character from the play to analyze whose mind is being pulled in conflicting directions by two compelling desires, ambitions, obligations, or influences, and explain how this conflict with the character shows the flaw in human nature, or that we are all subject to meet with fate no matter what we do. The question is basically asking you who is the tragic hero in this, or is there one? Is fate itself the agent of destruction and there is nothing that can be done to stop it? So you have a couple basic choices here, and we're going to break this up for you. So this prompt gives you two choices. And one of the activities is going to ask you to break these down so you can kind of figure out which way you want to go with this. Did the tragedy happen because there was a tragic flaw in a character, or did it happen because of the stars, fate? Choose just one and explain your decision. So here are your choices. If you said that there is a tragic flaw that leads to a hero's downfall, name the character and discuss the tragic flaw in that character's nature. What are the opposing forces? What are they being pulled between? Is it desires, ambitions, obligations, influences that trouble the character? What choice does the character make with those opposing forces? Or if you believe that fate determines the ending of this play, what is your evidence? Find at least 4 references to fate in the play and describe how the character becomes victim to it. The Queen Mob speech by Mercutio kind of gives us a little bit of a hint there. And there's a lot of places where the moon is referenced, the stars are referenced. And when that's referenced, that means it's being told, you're being told that it's out of your hands, that fate is indeed the agent of that. So you would need to find 4 places in the play where that happens, and you're going to argue that fate is definitely in control because of this, and this. But I want to show you what it actually looks like when you're writing a body paragraph for literary analysis. And I'm going to be giving you some different terms. These names are starting to come out of the Common Core and the different standards. And there's a new form of naming the pieces of the argument, but they're basically the same things that they've been all along. For example, hopefully you know at this point what the topic sentence is. We're going to start calling that a claim. A claim is something that you are stating, and you are expected to prove that claim as being true. So here's a claim. I've picked Friar Lawrence. I've always suspected Friar Lawrence has always been, he just meddles too much. So my claim is, and this is the topic sentence just for this one body paragraph, Friar Lawrence qualifies as the tragic hero because he uses the lovers as a means to bring peace to Verona. And so, what he's conflicted with is his obligation to Romeo as his mentor, as his almost literal father, but he's also trying to make peace in Verona. So, those are the two opposing forces that's pulling him apart. The next step you need is the evidence. So, you're going to turn now to the text and find out what was said and why that kind of proves what you're saying. So, you need what's called a lead in. You cannot assume that your reader has read everything in the play. Although, with Romeo and Juliet, most people know the story, but what we're trying to do here is set the reader in the context of the play. So you have to kind of tell what's going on before you tell what it is that you're looking at for the proof. So notice what I've done here. The friar chastises Romeo for quickly passing over Rosalind in favor of Juliet. So that puts us in the context of where we are in the play in Act 2, where Romeo has, it's early in the morning and the friar is picking his little herbs for his little pharmacia there. And he is telling Romeo, "You haven't been to bed tonight." And then I've fallen in love. I'm in love with this new girl. What about Rosalind? What have you done with Rosalind? Oh, she's in the past. And so we need to set that up for the reader. But then he decides, now we bring in the quote. In one respect, I'll thy assistant be, for this alliance so happy prove, to turn your household's rancor to pure love. Also notice how I have put the scene act. It's the act in the Roman numerals. It's the scene number in small Roman numerals, and then it's the line numbers that I've copied. One of the other things that I've done here is that I've put a slash mark. This shows that it's going from line to line. Since Shakespeare wrote this in iambic pentameter, and it's looking like poetry, essentially it is poetry, you want to show where the lines break. So that's what those slashes mean. Okay, so we have claim, we have evidence. The next step is to have an explanation of how those two are linked together. This is called the warrant. The warrant is making a justification how one leads to the other. From this, it appears that the friar is more concerned with ending the feud than he is about the marriage he is being asked to perform. He has just told Romeo how inconstant his love is, but the friar seems to forget all of this. So now I'm kind of explaining these two opposing forces from the quote. So I'm taking, he's thinking, well, Romeo, you just fell in love with Rosalind. How can you be in love with Juliet? But then it's like it almost dawns on him. Aha, maybe we can end this feud after all. So that's the explanation. Now I'm going to bring in more evidence to kind of back that up. So it's like a double whammy on the evidence. I still need to do the lead in on the quote. Ironically, after Romeo says, "Oh, let us hence," you can tell he's really anxious. Yeah, let's go get married now. I want to get married now. Gee, I wonder why he wants to get married now. Friar Lawrence ignores his own advice. Wisely and slow, they stumble that run fast. He's actually telling Romeo to slow down. You haven't had enough time yet to really know if you love Juliet. But at the same time, he's saying, okay, well, let's go jump into this marriage. So he's encouraging Romeo to marry Juliet to end the feud without thinking of the consequences of this union. So this sentence brings back why these two what the two opposing forces are, and why he's a doughhead, really. Friar Lawrence is just, I know he meant well, but he really didn't stop and think. And that's the very thing that he's telling Romeo, stop and think. Okay, the last part of your academic paragraph is a concluding sentence that you have to tie it back to the thesis, that major claim way at the top. Friar Lawrence is the tragic hero. So Friar Lawrence himself acts in haste. Knowing the violent history between the two families, he did not take the time to try to figure out what would happen if both Romeo and Juliet were to suddenly announce they were married. There is very little evidence to show the Capulets and the Montagues would be happy about their new in-laws. Can you imagine this? Assuming that the whole thing with Paris didn't happen, and Juliet comes home and says, "Hey, Mom and Dad, guess what? I got married." Now, in those days, there was, I suppose there could have been an annulment, but it really was once they're married, once Friar Lawrence takes them into that chapel and declares them husband and wife, what God has joined together, let no man separate. That's exactly what this means. It is too late at that point in this society. But what would have happened? How would they? I mean, think about how they would have reacted to that. There's no evidence. He just suddenly thinks, "Oh, if they get married, we can end the feud." He doesn't stop and think about it. So this is what an academic paragraph looks like. And these are all the pieces put together. Notice all the different parts. You've got the claim. So what you're doing is you're taking your major thesis and you're going to come up with two reasons. And how this fits with the second topic, if it's fate, you have two ways in which fate has intervened. And in this case, I will have two reasons why Friar Lawrence qualifies as the tragic hero. And my next paragraph would probably talk about how he lets everything get out of control and he doesn't step forward and say. He has a perfect time when Paris meets Juliet at Friar Lawrence's place. He has that ability to say, "You can't marry her. She's already married." But he doesn't do that. He just lets this charade keep going forward. Okay, so that's what I wanted to show you about how to write the academic paragraph. Just for the essay, what you're going to need is the introduction. And as usual, you need the hook and the thesis. I want to tell you now, high schoolers, do not ever start with a question. I think that was a technique that was used for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. You are in high school now. Hooks should not be questions. They can be quotes as long as the quote is in context, or that you're saying at the time who says something. The other thing is something that would interest your reader into reading further. If I were to start mine with Friar Lawrence should have taken his own advice, that's my hook. Then I can put in the thesis. I believe that Friar Lawrence is the tragic hero of Romeo and Juliet. And that's all you need for the introduction, 2 sentences. Then you're going to have 2 body paragraphs. So you basically are going to have 2 of these. Notice how many sentences are there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Is there 8 or 9? At least 8, 7 or 8. That's about what you want for those body paragraphs. You're going to have 2 of those, and then you have a conclusion. And the conclusion doesn't take much effort at all. You just need to say, kind of wrapping it all up. So if Friar Lawrence could only have listened to himself, maybe the 2 lovers would be alive today. Something like that. So